The State of Crypto is presented by Tron, connecting the world to the power of cryptocurrency.
The U.S. government's unprecedented move to sanction crypto mixing service Tornado Cash, a smart contract on Ethereum, continues to produce perverse consequences. Joining us now to discuss is Tor Bair. He's the founder of the Secret Foundation. Tor, hello. Thanks for joining us. So a 29-year-old developer is suspected of being involved in the sanctioned Tornado Cash protocol has been arrested in Amsterdam Friday, according to Netherlands' Fiscal Information and Investigation Service. FIOD began investigations in June. Multiple arrests have not been ruled out. What does this mean for privacy?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on to discuss this. I mean, it's obviously a critical issue, and it's a potential slippery slope. It's really early to start speculating exactly as to what the consequences are going to be for individual developers or users of protocols or anything else. But the immediate consequences are clear. It's having a chilling effect on especially anybody trying to interact with Tornado Cash, or as of this morning, I believe the Discord was deleted. This is really a sledgehammer. That's how I've been referring to it. A sledgehammer against what is kind of a nuanced sort of situation. This has never really happened before. There's never been a sanction for a smart contract. So the precedent here is kind of, it's very uncertain because it has even less to do with like, this is only about privacy on chain. This is only about mixers. Really, this could be setting precedent for things like freedom of speech, freedom of association, and beyond that, this could be the same tools that are used to target the developer of any open source technology, whether or not it's doing something that the government likes or doesn't like, or that we personally like or don't like. The consequences are really unknown. And even if all of this ends up getting overturned in courts, let's say years down the line, and it's clear that this was overreach, right? And it's still unclear right now whether that would be the outcome. What happens in the intervening years has real consequences to the people who are in these systems, especially as of this morning, as you're seeing with the arrests. Like, that can happen regardless of whether or not this is overreach. That's happening today. The consequences are current.
Yeah. Tor, do you think this is, I mean, look, what are the odds that two different governments would go after the same thing? Unless it were, so close together, unless there's something going on. I mean, there are two possibilities. One is that they coordinated before the arrest, or two, and they might not be mutually exclusive, but two could be that there's something happening that maybe we're not all aware of. Look, we have a war right now happening between Russia and Ukraine. We have all sorts of craziness going on in the world. Do you think that this was coincidence, or that do you suspect that at least Tornado Cash might have had some role in some sort of, I don't know, questionable things? I mean, look, the Dutch government isn't known for being, let's say, at least morally restrictive in the past. So,
I mean, without putting a tinfoil hat on, it seems pretty clear that the two events, at least the two narrow events, are pretty related. There's been an arrest of a developer, and there's been sanctions against the protocol directly, and it's happened within a 48-hour period. That's not really something that I would chalk up to coincidence. And as you guys were saying at the top, there may be more arrests, there may be more sanctions coming, there may be more consequences. There's enough data to show that, this was a service, this was a tool that was being used by bad people, but it was also being used by people who actually had absolutely no criminal intent and were only trying to focus on protecting their own individual privacy, which is a right that we all are exercising on a daily basis. So to see the governments here going after the tool and then after the developers, because they can't physically go and reach into North Korea and extract the bad actors there, the ones that they seem particularly concerned about, that is where people are starting to freak out a little bit, because it is unprecedented. And some of the arguments that are being used to justify this do kind of have that mark of being, if not just completely fabricated, at least they're overreaches, right? So the idea that they said in the arrest that this developer had profited greatly from other people's use of the mixing service, I don't see any evidence for that whatsoever. But that's certainly part of the justification that they were using in the arrest. It remains to be seen, right? If that is going to be the type of justification that would be used in other arrests, or if they come after other services or providers.
But can it be understandable at the very least that when you do have these nefarious players in the crypto market, whether we like it or not, that, hey, if you're going to play with the same tools they're going to use, that you might end up being hurt along with it? Like, for instance, if everyone has a nuclear weapon, but only 1 or 2 people use it, chances are you're going to end up with a nuclear war, right? You'll be in trouble too. I mean, like, I can't just strap plutonium on me and walk around and just say, well, I'm not going to use it. But like, don't you think that if I'm going to be the guy strapping plutonium on me, I might get in trouble?
Yeah, but that's not the right analogy to be using here. I actually heard a much better analogy recently, which is, criminals all the time drive on highways here in the US and in many countries. They use those highways for transporting drugs. Drunk drivers get in their cars and go on our roads, and it's not legal to drive drunk, and they slam into people who are completely sober all the time and kill them. And our solution is usually to go after the people who are drunk in the car, to go after the criminals. We don't think to ourselves, we really should rethink roads. We don't go after the tooling. We don't go after the infrastructure. We're certainly not going after the people who are paving the roads. We're going after the actual criminal actors. To assume that somebody driving on a public road and using open source technology is the analogy here, to assume that somebody doing that and saying that's the equivalent of strapping plutonium on yourself, the right to privacy online has nothing to do with being a bad actor or making a nuclear threat against another nation or engaging in money laundering. It's a normal everyday activity. Every product and service we use in the Web 2 world, we have at least some expectation of protecting privacy, and regulators fine companies billions of dollars when they don't protect consumer privacy. It's only here because there's the money, the financial component, because this is specifically a mixing service, that you start to get into that gray area of, okay, how nefarious is the action itself of wanting and requiring financial privacy? How much is that in itself a bad or illicit act? Yeah. I don't think that there's absolutely any evidence that there is, but there's certainly evidence that being a foreign actor and using it to fund nuclear development through money laundering through these public services, that is a bad action. And there's just only so many recourses governments can't take. Yeah. This is one of the ones they've chosen to do.
Well,
I just want to clear up that I'm not strapping plutonium. I'm not strapping plutonium on me. I just want to clear that up.
So Tor, you've told CoinDesk that protocols strictly solving for transactional privacy face a challenging path forward, as their narrow focus makes them a target for regulators that primarily seek to curb illicit financial activity. So what's the solution here?
Yeah, I did make that statement, and I mean it, right? I've said it many times in the past. When you start to build tools that look like they're only there to obfuscate the transfer of money from one place to another, you do start to look like a very, very juicy target for a regulator in any country, because it really does look like you're financing terrorist activity or things like that. And you'll lose in the court of public opinion, even if what you're doing is completely legal in terms of providing just public open source infrastructure for doing things online that regular everyday people are trying to do. The solution, as I've seen it, or is that we've seen it, especially in the secret network community, is we want to solve privacy for Web3 and for the internet, much more generally, because these are expectations we already have in Web 2. Where things got broken in Web 3 is we started with this completely public by default infrastructure for finance and for NFTs and for everything else that this is being used for now. And we had to reinvent privacy solutions that you slap on top of that. And so those things that you're layering on top look like mixers. They look like things that are explicitly designed to give you privacy in a completely transparent system. But if you have a private by default system where the universal expectation of users is my data online is going to be protected, that's a sustainable system. And that's actually the system that we want for the internet. It stops data leaks. It stops all of the very dangerous hacks that we hear about, right? Those are the real threats to us as online consumers, as people, as businesses, and even as governments. The fact that we have absolutely eroded the right to privacy online from the beginning is the real problem here. So we're trying to build systems again that are private by default, where users aren't just opting into privacy, which makes them look like, they're choosing something that makes them private. That shouldn't have to be a choice. That should be something that we all have the right to by default. And if you choose to make something public, you always can. You can reveal something to the world. You can reveal something just to a regulator, just to your accountant. That type of flexibility in a system We summarize that basically by saying it's private by default, it's programmable privacy, and it's a much more generalized view of how privacy in Web3 should look, as opposed to saying we just need mixer services to proliferate just in case you don't want to be public. We just need to flip the assumptions and say, no, privacy is normal. And when we want to share something with the world, that's our choice. We must consent.